What's going on, friends? This is the Year One Wrestling Podcast, the show that dives deep into the early stages and formation of your favorite professional wrestlers, bringing out their struggles, their fears, and most importantly, their most interesting stories. I'm your host, the King of Chaos, Logan Black. Thank you so much for checking us out on whatever platform you enjoy your podcasts. We are all about showing love here, so if you dig what you hear, or you just feel like being awesome, go ahead, show some love, hit that subscribe button, leave a review, 5 stars us, tell a friend, help us get the word out on this show. I hate to start out on a negative note, but I mean, you guys know that, we turn things up, especially with this interview that I'll get to later, but wrestling was dealt some really, really hard blows this week, devastating to the community with the passing of both Shad Gaspard and Hana Kimura. Just absolutely awful to hear about these things, and again, it really is this cycle within the wrestling community, obviously from different sources and different, reasons, but so many people within this community dying at a young age. So many young wrestlers, female and male, are just influenced by Hana Kimura and how much work she's put in and how much of a prodigy she was at 22 years old. And, there's no saying it any other way. Shad died a hero. He really was. So off the bat, my deepest condolences to everybody. And I'm speaking on behalf of pretty much everybody who listens to this. For me personally, looking at a situation like this, it hit pretty hard because I'm looking at a lot of friends of mine posting on social media. They've got pictures with Hana. They've done Japanese tours. They hung out with her when she was over here. People who hung out with Shad and worked shows with him. All of these photographs, all these memories that they have, and looking at my own self and how I go about things. Man, I don't have a lot of pictures with people who I've worked with or even just friends, man. Like this week they had that whole hashtag thing going of the light side of pro wrestling, or the, light side of the ring is what it was. And I was searching through my phone and social media for all the pictures I have with friends, and I don't have many. And that sucks. And I go back on that, and ingrained in me from an early stage was this idea of like, oh, asking for pictures with people makes you a mark. And man, that's some toxic shit. I gotta get that out of my head. And I think this is really kind of bringing that out. So trying to, take this really awful situation and turn it into a positive, like how could I better myself and all that? Well, man, just take those memories, take those people that you cherish, or just take awesome experiences, photograph them, videotape them, get them out there so that at some point you can look back on it, because I would hate to have been somebody who was close with either of those people and then I can look back and have nothing to show of that. You know what I mean? So going back, in so many of my friends, and I just don't have anything to show, I think now is the point for me to just, well, you know what? I need pictures with people. So off the bat, Mark Adam Haggerty, goddammit, I need a picture with you, because I love you to death, man. And all you guys, so many of my friends, just love all of you. And, hopefully, awful situations like this just bring us all closer together and realize how tight-knit of a community that we have, and how, in reality, we just kind of need to be expressing how much we care about each other, because, who the hell knows what the next step is. Before I get into talking about this week's guest, I just want to remind you guys that I am running a sale on my Pro Wrestling Tees store. Every single cent from my sales is going directly to Feeding America, which is a charity that is desperately needed at this point, as we're still in the midst of the global pandemic that is coronavirus. So if you go ahead and you check out my Pro Wrestling Tees store, you can get a shirt. You'll be supporting a good cause. At this point, I've blown away what my expectations for this were. So everything is just gravy. But hell, I genuinely don't think that Feeding America is going to take any issue with gravy, if you hear what I'm saying. So go ahead and check that out. ProWrestlingTees.com/King of Chaos NYC. And of course, I also have to mention the series being launched on the Year One Wrestling Podcast YouTube account. We've got multiple series going up at this point. By the time you guys hear this, I will have already uploaded the first episode of Road Tips, where a bunch of wrestlers just talk about what they believe to be the essential tips for traveling the road as a pro wrestler. In addition, we've got the other series that I'm working on that's coming out, which is wrestlers telling you their favorite prank stories. Of course, every Thursday, we've got Pro Wrestling Explained to my wife. That's where I sit down and try and explain a whole bunch of ridiculous old school wrestling stuff to my life partner. So, by all means, go right ahead, hit the subscribe button on the Year One Wrestling Podcast YouTube account for more and more content uploaded weekly. And also, how could I forget, exclusive stuff from the podcast. There's plenty of stuff that I cut out of these interviews and the edit. It ends up on the editing room floor. And boom, where does it go? Right there into fun little snippets. At some point next week, I'm going to upload the thoughts from both members of Bear Country on WrestleMania. I know that's at this point well over a month old, but hell, it's me talking with those guys about what they felt about WrestleMania. I thought it was pretty cool, so I'm hoping you guys feel the same way. That'll be up next week, so go ahead and check that out. Hit the subscribe button. But this week's guest is a buddy of mine who, hot damn, I don't think that I've ever laughed while putting together a podcast to this level. Nick Stapp, a.k.a. the former CPA. Man, Nick and I go back a number of years. We had feuded with each other, had about 1,000 matches. I think he mentions, I think he gets the proper number of it too, 50-something. Nick and I, just off the bat, we have a very similar sense of humor. And I think I tried to bring what we had just in locker rooms or like whenever we like bullshit and text each other out into a podcast. And I think that I definitely succeeded in doing that. I had to split this up into 2 episodes, so you're getting part 1 this week, and you'll be getting part 2 next week. Part 1 goes just about up to him training and having his first big match with WrestlePro, which I believe he is most known for. But we cover a ton of stuff because, hey, I didn't even know this, but Nick had started out training at Gleason's gym just like I did. He had to have come in like just as I was leaving. But man, do we share a lot of ridiculous stories. And you guys know, because I say it all the time, Gleason's collected craziness. And boy, do we get into some really fun and ridiculous things. Part 2 is no different, but we'll be talking about that next week. I'm just going to jump right in, and I genuinely, wherever you are listening to this, if you're in your car, maybe that's not the best time to listen, because if you were laughing as hard as I was laughing, you might crash, and I do not want to be responsible for that. So guys, here he is, Nick Stapp on the Year One Wrestling Podcast.
That's why I've been like just whoring myself out on podcasts. I'm like, yeah, I'll do your podcast. I have a nice mic now. Like, just use me. Just use me.
Well, thank you for being a whore on this podcast. Nick Stapp, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just jump right into it, dude. What was your first exposure to pro wrestling, or did you have any kind of wrestling background?
My first time watching wrestling, I think. So my dad, after my parents split when I was 4 or 5, my dad got his own place out on the island, Long Island for those. And he used to just like have like preset VHSs that I could watch in the event that he slept late. On this particular day, I guess the VHS ran out. Anyway, borderline, bottom line, I had to learn how to use the television by myself. I turned it on and I managed to flip to what ended up being a Papa Shango vignette. I screamed and shit my pants, and then I kept watching, and that's how I became a wrestling fan, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's possibly the most legitimate answer that we can get to that question for you. I mean, it's like I firmly believe that like Papa Shango. There you go, boom, done. I'm a fan.
Yeah, that's it. Like legit, if it wasn't for it started with that, and then my mom lived in Queens, and there was a hot video rental store, not Blockbuster. It was M&M Video, and it became Nova Video later. And they had, so it's weird with my early wrestling timeline. So like I didn't really watch it live on TV until like later when we like moved into a reasonably decent apartment and got cable. So my wrestling time, I was all over the place. Like, so I had the Papa Shango thing. Then like I had heard about Hulk Hogan and like Ultimate Warrior and stuff like that. And then I started renting the tapes from the video store. So like, but literally every time I went there, I was renting something from a different time period. So it would be like WrestleMania 5 one week, then SummerSlam 92 the next week. Then it would be like WrestleMania 3. So like I was all over the place. So like once I actually started following it closely, especially when I got a subscription to the magazine, I was like, what is going on? Like Shawn Michaels is wearing cow pants now, and like I had no idea. So
dude, those magazines were really like, I think people don't give it enough credit because like the printed media it like doesn't exist anymore at this point.
Hmm.
But man, those magazines were like if you were getting them, you were just waiting for that week when they came in like at your mailbox.
Yeah. And even though they were like whatever, maybe a month and a half behind as far as like the modern product goes, like it was still, it literally like two issues of the WF magazine, and I was caught up on literally everything that was going on in WWF. Like I knew Hogan wasn't necessarily there anymore, although I didn't understand. I knew, and it's weird too because I knew about WCW because right around the time where I started getting into it, I had other family members who were into it who had like old VHSs and stuff like that. So I borrowed, or actually I ended up just getting it just because they never asked for it back. But I got this VHS Greatest Grudges. It was from WCW, and it had like the Magnum TA Tully Blanchard I Quit match. It had like the Roddy Piper Greg Valentine dog collar match. It had, I think, the first time Sting won the title at Clash of Champions. So, but I didn't know that they were two separate companies. So I was very in the dark on like what I didn't know what capitalism was basically because I was whatever 7, 8. So, but yeah, like as far as the WWF universe of things, I knew everything that was going on within 2 issues of the WWF magazine.
Yeah, those magazines were seriously dope. I got Raw magazine. I as a kid, I remember getting like issues here and there from the newsstand of WWF, but Raw magazine, I had a subscription for 2 straight years. That was like my budding junior high sexuality came out. Yeah, came out to the photos of Tori and Miss Jackie and Sable. I was 1 issue off from like the most famous one, which was the Sunny one. I had gotten the issue
yeah.
after that. That's when I started. But if I had any of those, like still, they've got to be worth like buttloads of money.
Yeah, probably.
Oh,
Especially like in good condition, yeah.
oh, they definitely weren't in good condition, if you catch my drift. So,
Stuck together, yeah.
so where and when did you start wrestling?
So this is kind of a multi-layered tale, as most things I do are. So originally, if you have time, I apologize.
Yes, I have
don't need
all
to
the
be
time,
long-winded.
all the time in the world. We're all locked in our houses right now.
Yeah,
Go for
right. A disaster. Like everyone's worried about like, oh man, my bump card. It's like, hey, your bump card is like reset now, brother. Like you get like X amount of time off now. So bump card is a myth. So
I will dispute that with you every single day because sweet Jesus, my body hurts. But continue.
So, well, you've been wrestling longer than me too. I'm sure maybe like 5, 10 years. I'll be like, oh goddamn. So
I've
but
also taken shitty, like I take the worst fucking stupid ass bumps on like a weekly basis. So I'm enjoying this break. But I
yeah.
digress. This is about you and your shitty bumps. So talk to us. How'd you break in?
So originally, we're going all the way back to. I don't want to. I guess I'm going to age myself a little bit, but all the way back to 1999, I want to say, late 99. My friend joined a backyard wrestling promotion that was literally a block away from my mom's house. He was like, dude, you got to join. I know you want to wrestle, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I wanted to do it, but like, I was worried that my parents weren't going to give me the thumbs up. My dad said, yeah, go ahead, do it. But I want to go and see like, what you guys are doing. Like, cause I used to go to my dad's house every weekend anyway. But his caveat was basically like, I need to be there. Otherwise you can't do it. My mom was straight up like, no fucking way. And I was like, Mom, I'll be down the block. It'll be fine. Dad's going to go, even though like they weren't together and they barely got along at the time. Like their only contact was like my dad giving me child support money to give to my mom. Like, that was the extent
you're
of their
speaking my
contact.
language right now. I need you to understand it.
That was literally my parents' relationship was, all right, give this to your mom. Okay, Mom, this is from Dad. Ugh. Okay. Yeah, so my first time down there, it was, I think, late September, early October 1999. I just went down there to like hang out. And then my friend Greg was like, oh, you're going to manage us. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever. And then I think I posted the GIF of it on Twitter recently. So You grew up in Brooklyn?
Yeah,
Okay.
Sheepshead Bay.
Okay. So where I grew up in Queens, in Glendale, Queens, New York, is like it. So like, especially in the late '90s, like everyone thought they were like alpha male, but they were really just. It was like I don't know. It was like the tough guy version of like the I fucking love science Facebook group. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, look at this, like, look at how cool I am. But it's really like, no, you're just kind of a loser and like you just have like daddy issues kind of thing. That was Glendale. So everyone there was a bunch of bully assholes basically. And this is what I grew up around. So my friend Greg was like the target of all this stuff, which made me the third hand target of it because my other friend Will was there and he was like his his sidekick or whatever. So one of the I guess in a funny way you could call them the vets of the
vets
crew.
of backyard wrestling.
Yeah, the vets
Fucking
of
love it.
backyard wrestling who never did anything outside of backyard wrestling. Um, they started like the one guy started coming at me or whatever, and I was like kind of fighting back, but in like what I thought was a working kind of way. And he hit me in the head with a plastic water jug, and it exploded all over the place. And I didn't sell it because I was like, "Fuck this guy! I'm gonna like, show him what's up." And like from there, everyone was like, "All right, you gotta join. You gotta like wrestle with us because you're a fucking psychopath." Um, so I
Fucking just sitting there
joined
like the
up.
Sandman.
Yeah,
And
legit.
getting over.
And
It's
actually,
brilliant.
one of my friends wrestled there as the Sandman, but he was 12 and stole his dad's cigarettes and beer, and yeah, we were hood rats. We were hood rats in the least hood neighborhood on earth. So yeah, I did that for a while. Then in late 2000, I guess the guy who ran it, aka whose parents' backyard we did it in. Oh, by the way, we didn't just do it on trampolines or dirt. We did it in like this guy built a ring like out of wood and mattresses, so he would like bump on mattresses. So it was great. Like it made no noise, but like it never hurt. I think like one kid ever got hurt, and it was like he slipped and like broke his wrist. Like literally nobody ever got hurt. And that was like the other thing is that my dad started going with me every week because he had such fun watching it because nobody ever got hurt. And it was just us just doing, again, this is like late 99, early 2000s. So we were just like doing shit that we watched on TV. Like we were like, oh, who's going to do the Swanton this week? And who's going to do the Twist of Fate this week? And who's going to do the Bubba Bomb this week? Like it was that pretty much. We just had our own characters, most of us, except my friend Mark who did the Sandman. So in late 2000, one of the guys sliced his head open. So it was raining out. So obviously we couldn't do backyard wrestling because it was raining out. So we would do, on days it was raining, we would do like interview segments in the guy's house. And one guy split his head open. I think he got like 30 or 40 or 100. I don't know. He got basically a million stitches in his head because his head went through a plate glass window, and they were literally just doing like a bullshit, like little stupid brawl, and somehow it got a little out of hand, and he just went through the window, so we weren't allowed to do backyard anymore. So, and it had nothing to do with the art at all. It had nothing to do with the fact that the cops were called there every week when we would do it, and everyone was smoking cigarettes and smoking pot and drinking beer and cursing and being, kind of delinquents. But yeah, so the guy who ran it, I'm still friends with most of the people there, which is kind of why I like hold it in such a, I guess, a romanticized light. I think he had trained at the doghouse for a brief period of time. I don't know how, because he was not much. He was probably like 4 or 5 years older than me, and I was a child at the time. But he started having us do shows at the doghouse every other Sunday. We all had to pay, of course, because, why not? We would just wrestle in a real ring in front of each other. Like there was never a crowd there. It was just us just doing the shit that we were doing in the yard, but in a real stiff ass ring. So we did that for a while. That was actually fun because I kind of like I would go to training sometimes at like Homicide or like Lathon. I'd be running training. It was literally just like like the one time we were doing grape squishers for what probably was like felt like 8 hours. It might have been 20 minutes, but it was like just forever. Like shit like that. Just like death drills. But in that time, I learned how to like run the ropes and bump kind of well, or at least like passable enough to be one of the better guys in our shitty little backyard promotion that was in a real ring.
I mean,
I guess
before you keep going, I mean, that's just it's kind of fascinating. You guys went from the backyard to actually like training in a legitimate ring, and you said you were doing shows on at Doghouse.
Well, we were doing our own shows. We like
Right.
I never did like an LIWF show, but like yeah, we were running our shows at the Doghouse.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty fucking insane if you really think about it, man.
And that's how like I became friends with like like EC Negro and like guys like that. Like I'm not like close with all of them now, but like I became friendly enough with them through that time period, which was weird because like we came in and we were just the shitty white, the white backyard white boys, and everyone there was just tough as nails and just like really like just not particularly like friendly human beings for the most part, except low life Louie. You won't be surprised by that.
Yeah, Louie's the greatest human being ever.
Oh, he's great. He's like I did when Jeff Cannonball was doing his hot wing challenge thing for a while. Louie was there the one time I went, and I made a reference to Kennedy Fried Chicken that was 2 blocks away from the Doghouse, and I think Louie like shit himself laughing. So yeah. Yeah, we did that for a while, and then I think the Doghouse closed down in like probably June or July of 2002. They briefly opened a new one in Ridgewood, which was like where I hung out, where I went to school. So I was like, oh, this is great. I can like wrestle now. Like I could wrestle all the time. I can go to training every day, which I was like perfectly ready to do, except for the fact that I was also like trying to get laid all the time, which literally didn't happen until many, many years later. And just, and then I distinctly remember they were supposed to have a show in it must have been October 2002. I was hanging out with some girl that I was trying to hook up with, which I never hooked up with her, spoiler alert. And I said, hey, I'm gonna go to some wrestling show on Fresh Pond Road, which for those of you familiar with Ridgewood, Queens, Fresh Pond Road is like the epicenter of Ridgewood, New York. So I went there, and all the guys were just standing outside with their bags, and apparently they just closed. They just closed the building down. Like the show never happened, and they were never trained there again. It was a really small building, but they could have finagled something certainly. But yeah, it just never happened. So that was pretty much it for me with wrestling for a while until like 2008, pretty much.
And what was 2008 for you? Where did you start up?
So I joined. This is where you and I and others of our kin are connected at the soul. I joined Johnny Rod's World of Unpredictable Wrestling in mid 2008. I want to say, yeah, that was an interesting time because I watched wrestling pretty like religiously throughout that whole time period. But again, I was just like going to school, like I got a job and shit like that, and I was just like, I don't know, like I missed it, but I was like, I'm like too short, and I just whatever. I don't like it's not realistic for me to try to do this. And then I don't know, like I was talking to one of my friends, and he was like, yeah, I don't know, like I kind of want to give it a shot. And I was like, all right, so let's fucking, let's do this. And he ended up kind of like not doing it, but I like called Gleason's gym and spoke to Johnny Rods, and he was like, oh, come down, we're here on Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday. And I was like, all right, I'll see you tomorrow. So went down there. I wore a suit for some reason. I don't know why I thought that was a necessary thing to do, but I dressed up.
Preparing for your future.
Yeah, preparing for my future of wrestling Mikey Firezone.
That's the first Mikey Firezone name drop on this podcast, and it could not have been more perfect.
On probably any podcast.
Yeah.
So I went down there with a suit on, like a goober, and I just took rods for like a half hour, and I remember like I went in, and I think a few people were hanging out in there, like Flex and um, who else? Who was like that crew? Like I want to say like what's his name? Pete Simmons.
Pete
Was
was
he?
probably there. Smooth operator Mike Gallagher.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
Was Joe there at the time?
I don't remember. I only the first time I met or like interacted with Joe was his last Ever Gleason show, which we might get into at some point.
We have to.
Yeah. So I went down there all like dressed to the nines. Well, I guess whatever my version of dressed to the nines was at the time. I just talked to Johnny for a while, and he was like, kind of like, I guess, because I knew about him and I knew enough about wrestling to kind of be like, oh, you used to wrestle and fuck, here and there. And he was like, oh, how you know about that? And I was like, I watch DVDs, Johnny. Like just do the very like rudimentary research, So joined whatever, gave him. He actually like. I don't know. It was weird. I know or at least this is what he told me. He charged everyone else like 3,000, and he did not charge me, which is why I don't feel as bad about not pursuing my wrestling career there. But I went for a little.
He charged. It depended on who came in. Like he told me $3,000. It ended up being 2,700 for me. I know other people paid 1,500, and then other people paid like $6,000. So like it was literally about like who he saw dollar signs in. Like if he saw that you were like a mark that would pay $6,000, he was gonna take it. I think he needed money when I was like paying. Like I guess maybe he might have been like short on rent or something like that. Because like with my like I think I paid him like 20 or rather $2,000, and then he goes, "Listen, you give me 7, we're good." And then that was that.
I don't think I ever fully paid him because,
Yes.
well, I'll get to that.
Yes.
So I think he was going to charge me 1,500. So I gave him like whatever. I think I just got my tax return, so I gave him some of it. And I was like, yeah, I'll get you, whatever. And then like after going there for like a few weeks, I mean, you were there, so like,
Oh yeah.
the training structure was non-existent. Like we would get there, and like sometimes I would get there and nobody would be there, and I'd just be in the ring by myself, and Johnny would be sitting in his office just doing whatever. Then other times there'd be like a million people there, and it would be just like tag-ins, like forever, like we do no structure whatsoever. Like that was my first time in a wrestling ring in years, and it was just like, all right, let's do tag-ins, which is fine if you have like your basics down, but I didn't. I was literally going off of things that I hazily remembered from 6-7 years ago. So yeah, I would just go and like do tag-ins and like this and that and the other thing. It was like just no structure at all. And I remember the last time I went there, and I stopped going there in late 2008 because I got laid off from my job, and I was just like, whatever, I was like, I'm not paying $70 for like a gym that I can't even use. You know what I mean? Like they had like a treadmill and like 3 dumbbells there. Like what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Not that I was a fitness guru at the time, but I at least like, if I'm gonna pay $70 a month on top of paying this man whatever it is that he's supposedly using to train me, which I never saw him in or really near the ring at all.
Yep, doesn't happen. Unless the news crews are there. That's when he gets in.
Yes.
I always say this. He gets in the ring. He walks in. Everyone's waiting because everybody knows the gimmick. He comes in. He shakes your hand and gives you the Porky Pig Mr. Mato flip from Looney Tunes. And then he'll grab the top rope and like he gave you the woofa kick. Where he like turns and throws his foot up. And you got to sell for him.
Yeah.
So everyone knows the deal. Only time he ever got in the ring.
I was never there for that, but I've heard of it. I think you probably told me about it.
Oh yeah, the woofa.
So 2 reasons I stopped going. One, I got laid off, and I was just like, whatever, it's not really worth it. I went to a few of the shows as just like whatever. I haven't really told a lot of people about this, but literally the day I signed up, he was like, I'm gonna put you on the next show, and I was like, what? Because I told him I'd like trained a little bit when I was a kid, and he's like, what do you know? It's like, the ropes and bump and like lock up and stuff. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna put you on the next show. He's like, your name gonna be Nick Silver, and I was like, it's not great, but okay, sure. And I believe that my first match, I was gonna be, if I'm not mistaken, teaming up with Tim Arson and someone else against the Horse Pack. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was gonna be my first match at Gleason's. Literally like the week I signed up.
Did that not happen?
No, I have gear, so I showed up. I was like, bro, I don't even have anything to wear. He's like, no problem, whatever. I wasn't selling tickets because I didn't know that was. I also didn't know ticket selling was a thing at the time, so I just wasn't smart to it at all.
So yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, did you mention having a big family or like a lot of friends to Johnny? Like,
No.
during the really okay. No, because I remember when I had gone into his office, I had mentioned that I had a big family that was all wrestling. Oh, how you know about wrestling? What? I was like, oh, my family are big. They don't. And immediately I know he saw dollar signs because he put me 3 weeks in to training. He put me on a show as well because he knew I'd sell tickets.
Yeah. So yeah, I went to a few of the shows and I was like just watching, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, this isn't wrestling. This is like, and again, this is like to the mostly untrained eye at the time. Like, I kind of knew what wrestling, like I knew what wrestling was supposed to look like, but I didn't know like the things I know now. But I was like, this is dog shit. Like, these guys are like, none of these guys are good. And again, that's like, I know, I'm not to sound like a dick, but like, I would say there were like a handful of guys who were like decent to good, and then everyone else like who was good? Like Flex was pretty good. Like fucking, I think Joe So Delicious was still there at the time. He was like okay. Like,
yeah, Joe's passable. Pete was passable.
yeah.
Smooth was good. Like, if you had like, Ric Flair's match from like '87, you were good with Smooth. No, and like, that's not me knocking Smooth at all. Like, Smooth wrestled just like, I mean, he all the same bumps. The dude took the backdrop just like Flair did. Flair takes it because his back is broken. Smooth did it because Smooth loved Flair. Those guys were all pretty good. I think by that point was Jorge Santi there, or did he gone?
Yes,
he was good.
there.
He was always really good. Like, when I joined up, he was like a few months in. He was excellent. Was Chris there at the time?
Chris.
Member of the Batiri?
I don't remember. Honestly, I don't remember.
That was my crew of guys who were like pretty good when I was there. And then like everything else was just like fucking doo-doo.
It's funny. The last show I went to, which again, as I touched upon before, was we watched El Shoe's last match at Gleason's. My friend came with me, and because we were gonna go out afterwards, we're like, let's hang out. I didn't really help with anything. I just like showed up, and they knew who I was, so we didn't pay to get in or whatever. And I just sat down and we watched the show. And the only thing we took from that show was El Shoes. And I didn't know him at the time, and I'm not even lying about this because he's my friend. Like, literally, that's the only thing I remember about that show, because his whole match, he kept doing this thing where I forget who he wrestled. It might have been that clown guy. I don't know. He'd remember more than I would, and I'm gonna text him about it right now while we're talking, and I'll circle back to that. So the only thing we took from that was he kept doing this thing, or I think it was like the other guy would go to lock up with him and he would duck it, and then he'd turn around and go, no. And me and my friend Pete were just dying the whole night because we kept bringing that up over and over again, because again, that's the only thing we took away from that show that was memorable and not complete dog shit. I think who's that guy? Viola?
Oh my god. Dude, Mark Viola was
yes.
He was if he joined up, he was training there, but he was funding a lot of stuff for Johnny, so Johnny would do lots of stuff with him.
I really he was helpful in the fact that he built a bunch of shit there, but right. I watched him wrestle.
Yeah, no, he would build a lot of the stuff for Johnny, and it was the equivalent of ticket, but he also sold tickets too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he did.
So he sold tickets and he built stuff. So Johnny, he was a champion at the time, I'm gonna guess, right? Yep, there you go. Built things, sold tickets. He's a champ. Continue.
So it was that, and again, the shows were really bad, but Shoes doing the no thing and Johnny doing live commentary over the fucking matches and yelling at the student refs because they weren't doing ref stuff. Where the
Referee.
thing, what do you say, ref? What do you say, ref?
Oh, just before we continue, what is your favorite Johnnyism as a live commentator?
Oh, what do you say, ref?
What do you say, ref?
What do you say, ref? Before I even met you guys, before I even got into like actually into wrestling, that I would think about that at least 17 times a week, like just on the train, like listening to music, and all of a sudden, like it'd be like now passing some stop in Brooklyn, I'd be like, "What do you say, ref?" And then it would just move on. Like that is like I could get CTE one day, which I probably will, and I will always remember. What do you say, ref? Pete Simmons was the guy he wrestled that night. Apparently,
Viola?
he just told me. No, Shoes.
Oh, then they were both having a blast.
Yeah. He dropped the North America title to him and then said, "I'm fucking leaving," and then that was that.
Dude, so my two favorite Johnnyisms, because they both hold a special place in my heart. 2 counts? Oh no, that's not even that one. When he would intro guys, he would go, "Here he is, the one and only." Everybody was the one and only. That one was the best, and the other one I think only happened once because I said it. I told the story on the prologue episode of the podcast where 2 guys were the final 2 in a battle royal and then refused to lose, so they were shooting on 10 minutes straight to try and get the elimination. And Johnny is sitting there going, "Oh, I think it's time for me to go home." To stay home to try and like push these guys along because giving them time cues was not.
No, they were trying to have a definitive ending to this Austin Rock classic that they were having at Gleason's gym.
You say that, but literally one guy's only move was the stunner, and the other guy used the rock bottom like it was going out of style. You're not wrong. I swear to get these shows on DVD or like something. I have some of my old matches, but I need to get like more complete Gleason shows because people don't understand, because if they're not from like that scene, they don't understand just how fucking insane that place was.
I had been to a decent amount, like, some indie shows by that point. Like I was going to Ring of Honor shows. I had been to like, the Marathon USA Pro shows. I think one of them is still going on right now. But those shows were like jaw dropping. Like, what am I watching right now? Like, this isn't even wrestling. This is just like, and again, I didn't know anything about match structure at the time. Like, I didn't know. I mean, like, I knew, but like, I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know like how I would do it. But like, holy shit, dude! Like, just mind boggling. And now in hindsight, I will watch those videos. Like I'll just put in WW wrestling every so often if I'm bored, and it's just the same. It hasn't evolved past that point. Really,
there's nobody there who's really bringing anything out of those guys. I mean, in all honesty, like who's teaching them anything outside of? They're still learning the side bump over there, dude.
The side bump.
Granted. I'll give all the credit in the world to the fact that like I can still walk upright because I take side bumps on a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
But I've over the years woven that into my style. Like, you know what I mean? Where like I could take that and it doesn't look like I'm taking the Nikolai Volkov shoulder tackle side bump roll gimmick. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Any wrestling fan knows it. Yeah. But like they're still learning the side bump, and I'll never forget. It was Smooth. I believe Pete and Joe Delicious all went to one of those like Harley race camps when I was going over there, and they brought back like all of the training over there because Harley was like, "Oh, I love Johnny, but nobody's doing the side bump." Right? So Johnny is getting heated at this, and he goes, "Fuck him! Who the fuck did he ever put over?" And then he starts doing squats in the office. "Oh, could that cocksucker do this?" And he starts squatting. I'll never forget. we had like this, full on training day of like doing all the fucking Harley race drills, and Johnny did not like it.
I'm just picturing in my head like Johnny Rods can barely walk upright, but he's doing squats just to prove a point. I love it.
He was definitely, he sat the rest of the day and he had to ice his knees down, I'm sure. But like, yeah, like there were a couple situations like that when people would bring up the Samoans. They were always someone that he shit all over. They also had a school that wasn't super far away.
Right.
That was another option. Yeah, there were a lot of people like that, but like I'll never forget that because these guys, they went out and they tried to better themselves, and nope, not good for Johnny. We're just gonna keep going on like different like ways of finding everything because it's always gonna come back to us sharing amazing Gleason stories.
Yeah.
And to be brutally honest, I think that's what's going to make this podcast unique, like this specific episode. But let's talk about your first day of training there, because I'm going to compare it to my first day of training. I didn't know that you were a Gleason's guy. Like I thought you like had stopped by there and were like, yeah, no. But I didn't know you actually joined up. So like, this is great. I want to compare mine to yours. What was your first day like?
The only thing that I can absolutely tell you about my first day. I mean, like, whatever. We were just, again, it was just tag-ins and bullshit. Like, I think Musketeer was running class, and he was just like, take bumps and run the ropes, and just kind of like put me through the very, very, very basic paces. And then we were doing, I don't think we definitely weren't doing drills, but I think some sort of all-around tag thing. And I guess this is kind of a lesson that young prospective wrestlers should not have to learn in flesh. Someone gave me a snapmare and my entire dick came out of my shorts and I just went home. I just left. I didn't leave immediately, but I fixed myself and everyone started like trying to just throwing like gloms at me and shit because of it. And then I was just like, well, this is probably going to be my life here. So like right away, I actually literally I forgot about that until you just said your first day. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, that happened. My first day, my dick came out in front of everyone and, pretty much downhill from there.
Nothing is going to top your dick coming out.
Yeah, it was weird too because so again, I guess we were doing like not drills, but just like everyone line up, take a snapmare, everyone line up, take a body slam, whatever. I was a big boxers guy at the time because they're fucking comfy, but I hadn't considered the possibility of this sort of thing happening. So we did snapmares, and I forget. It was some other, I'd never heard of him before or since in my life, but he seemed like he had been around for a reasonable amount of time. I don't know, it was just some dude. And he gave me a snapmare and I went over and I took I think they did the side bumps off the snapmare, I think there, right?
Oh, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, the side bumps off the snapmare, the flat, because some schools will teach like the snapmare as like a flip on your ass.
Yeah.
Whereas Gleason's was always the side bump and then let someone sit you up.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I took the side bump and Musketeer was like pointing down at my leg area and I was like, oh, did I land wrong or whatever? He was like, oh, what is that? And I looked down, I'm like, oh fuck. And then everyone just starts fucking glomming me and jumping me basically. They weren't hurting me, but they were, hazing me, I guess, because my dick came out. So yeah, that was my first day. I don't remember much else about it except my dick came out, and it was a sign of things to come, or at least a sign of not to be there, basically.
There's really nothing at that point. There's no other route to go. My dick came out on my first day, and then and you still kept going there, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I went there for a little longer. Of course, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I suppose. But yeah, again, it was just every time I went there after that, it was varying amount of people there. So again, sometimes there was no one there. I think the last time I went there, it was a Saturday and nobody was there. And I'm just running the ropes and bumping. And I went on the treadmill for 20 minutes. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I didn't really work out the time and nobody was there. And I went into Johnny and I was like, hey, is anyone showing up? he's like, yeah, don't worry, just keep, stay out there. And then like I think Santi showed up and he had me like hit the ropes for a little while and do this and that. And then I was like, bro, I gotta go. Like I've been here for like 3 hours and I've trained for like 20 minutes. And then yeah, like I got laid off from my job like a week or two later. So that was pretty much it for me.
That was the thing about some of the. I mean, I don't know how. I know when I had first started out, and like Santi and I are buddies now, but like when I started out, he was kind of a dick, and like I don't necessarily mind saying it because I think he fell in with the culture over there, which was very much like douchebag central. And then eventually, I think he kind of found himself where like he grew up, he matured, but also like he realized like, yo, like this isn't what I think it is. But he was like a lot of the guys there who were good would not fuck around with, younger, greener guys just because like there was nothing in it for them to just sit there. And because again, the culture of that place was not, I'm here to train you. It's we're here working together.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm going to sit down and I'm going to teach you what to do. It was more of like, oh, am I not going to be able to like have a fun training match with you? All right, fuck this. Like I remember there were a lot of times, and again, I like Flex. Flex was cool and helped me out, but there were so many times that I'd be there with like the other crew of people I hung out with who were all the shits, and Flex would literally just be like stretching out in the ring or like laying down and just go, oh, do a bump. All right, do a side bump. All right, hit the ropes, do a side bump. And that was like it. And then like when other people would show up, we'd like all be to the wayside and they just start working with each other. But, oh, okay, like we're just gonna sit here and stand in the corner. Okay. So, but yeah, like it's all about culture. I'm assuming you didn't have any matches there on any of his shows?
No, thankfully I didn't.
What was your first match? Let's talk about that. And where was it? What happened?
So many years, well, not many years later, but I think so. Again, another kind of, I'll try to make this as short-winded as possible. So how I eventually actually legitimately got into wrestling. So you know about this because you're a New York guy. Anyone on the Northeast probably knows about this person, this name I'm about to drop, Brimstone.
Oh my God.
So has nothing really to do with him, but it kind of does. So when Wikipedia first became a big thing, I would literally spend hours just on people's Wikipedia pages, just like learning every stupid thing about them, and just like, oh man, I can't believe, so and so wrestled at Ring of Honor once, or just like whatever, just random garbage research because I was bored and it was 4:00 in the morning. I was looking at Homicide's page one time, and I was scrolled down to see because it had like a tab of wrestlers trained by Homicide. I was like, oh, let me see if like any of the guys I know are down here, and I knew everyone's name. Like I didn't like it wasn't anyone I was like particularly friendly with. And then I saw Brimstone. I was like, who the fuck is Brimstone? And originally I thought maybe he was one of the rednecks from hell. I don't know if that rings a bell for you, but they were like
vaguely familiar.
Yeah, they were like doghouse guys. They were just like tall dudes who like thought they were Pantera. So I was like, oh, maybe he was one of those guys. And then I opened his Wikipedia page. Holy shit. I was like, what is, because also like on top of wrestling, I would look up like, just like random historical stuff. Cause I was like kind of a nerd about stuff at the time. And I was just like, again, I was working like a shitty part-time job and I just was like bored with my life. So I was like learning stuff and whatever. I was like kind of a degenerate in high school and I didn't really pay attention. I was like, let me like try to teach myself things instead of, because I also wanted to go back to school eventually, so I didn't want to be an idiot my first day there. I was like, yo, Money's Wikipedia page is like longer than like Joseph Stalin's Wikipedia page. Like it is insane. I'm scrolling and I'm like, who is this guy? I've never heard of this guy before.
You know why, right?
Yes.
And why is that?
Because he created his own Wikipedia page, correct?
Yep, he was infamous for that.
Yeah, and he would, like Usain Bolt, jump in and change it, revert it back anytime anyone changed anything. So I'm like scrolling through and I'm like, holy shit, like this guy must have done something. And it's just like Brimstone appeared backstage at TNA one time, and I was like, what the fuck has this guy done? Why does he have such a long Wikipedia page? So anyway, I told a few of my friends about it, and I told my one friend Pete, who I had brought up before who I went to the Gleason show with, I was like, bro, you have to look at this. Like, I think we were like drunk one night. We were watching like Wrestling Society X or something, and I was like, bro, you have to see this guy's Wikipedia page. I pulled it up, but we were just like dying laughing. So I think it was probably like 2012. He texted me and he said, hey, this podcast I listened to, this wrestling podcast I listened to, did a 2-hour episode, literally just talking about Brimstone. I was like, send link, stop, say no more, send the link, please. And it turned out to be the podcast that Pat Buck did with Kevin Matthews and Jay Silva. So I listened to it. I was like dying laughing the whole time. I was like, I can't believe these are all real things, and this guy actually existed. Like, I thought he was like fake. I thought like whole joke now about how what's that guy's name? Dylan Bostic is like not a real person, and he's just like a Twitter bot that has like 500,000 followers, but he follows 450,000 people. Like, it was like that for me. I was like, he's not a real. There's no way he's a real person. And then Pat just told a million stories about him. I was like, holy shit! Like, he's a real human being. Anyway, so like I kept listening to Pat's podcast, and he started talking about the wrestling school and everything. So I remember I was working at a screen printing place at the time, and the other guy who worked there, he wasn't like really a wrestling fan, but he was like familiar enough with it. And like the one day I was like doing something, and he just like looked at me and he was like, what are you doing with your life? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, why are you working here? Why aren't you doing something in wrestling? Like, you're an idiot. Like, you love it. That's all you talk about. Like, why don't you go do it? And I was like, huh, I guess I could. I mean, I don't know. So I did some very rudimentary, tiny research on places that were closer to me, went to some shows to kind of scout out what kind of product they were putting forth. And I went to the PWS show. It was like Jerry Lynn's second to last match. It was him and Lance Storm at Metuchen. And I saw there were like fucking like 12 of the students were on the show, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then like I went to one or two other shows, and all the students were in security shirts, and I was like, oh, that's not really what I want to do. Like, if I'm gonna get back into this at it was like 26 at the time. I was like, if I'm gonna get back into this, I want to like do it, So Pat was having an open house in like late May of 2013. So I went, talked to Pat, talked to Kevin. Like, I already like basically knew them because I was listening to the podcast every week. And then I was just like, all right, I'm going to join. Like, just give me like 2 weeks to get some money together, and I'm going to start coming down. And again, I lived in Queens at the time, so I would take public transport. I would take New Jersey Transit to Metuchen, New Jersey every like 3 days a week for years. My first match, so I was training for a little while. I started like the second week of June 2013. I was training for a little while. Like, I'm not naturally, in case you haven't picked it up from wrestling me like 38 times, I'm not like naturally athletic or like good at things. It takes me like a really long time to get like good at things. So I was like struggling a little bit just because, again, like leapfrogs, like, oh my God, I have to like leave my feet. This is insane. I was also like 210 pounds at the time, and my general nutrition consisted of like Doritos and Four Loko. So like I wasn't really, I wasn't in shape as they say.
As they say.
As they say. I wasn't in wrestler shape at the time. So we had a student show coming up, and I think I was training for a little over a month and a half by this point. So I wasn't expecting to be. So basically, Pat was like, "All right, we're gonna have a rumble with a bunch of the new guys," and I was like, "I'm not gonna be in that. I'm not ready to be even in a rumble at this stage." And Pat was like, "All right, this one, and Nick," and I was like, "Oh, all right." So now he's like, "But you have to have like gear or like something to present to me. Like, if you just show up in your training shit, then don't bother." And there were like other guys who didn't get into it because they didn't have anything to wear. So I'm like racking my brain. Like, I had this idea for this gimmick I wanted to do. This was like right around like the tail end of Occupy Wall Street, and I wanted to do a gimmick. I actually wanted to do this before I signed up for the school, but like kind of an Occupy Wall Street activist where I would be like occupying wrestling shows and like protesting them and shit like that, and like, oh, we don't get paid enough or whatever. And I wouldn't get paid for a wrestling show for another 2 years of my life. So I mean, do the math there. So I was talking to, once again, all roads go back to my friend Pete, who I will tell to listen to this, and I'm sure he'll listen to it and he'll become a regular fan because he's a good fucking dude. I was talking to him one night and he was like, I have this like silly gimmick that I've been floating around in my head that I think you should try. And it was the Notorious CPA, where my thing was I was cryogenically frozen in 1986, and I was brought back in 2013 to take down the wrestling industry, basically. So I went up to Pat, like the practice before the show, and I was like, "Hey, Pat, I got this gimmick that I kind of want to do." And like Pat was like half listening, and basically all he wanted to hear was like, "I have something to wear." He's like, "All right, great." And like, again, I don't think he just wanted to hear, "Okay, I have something to wear." Great. So in our little brainstorming activity, I came up with, he's like, "Oh, maybe you could wear like," because my friend Pete's idea was like, I was like the city slicker type, which like, if anyone knows me even a little bit, like that's not me at all. But basically I was going to be like, what's his name? Tiger Blood. What's that guy's name? The actor.
Oh my God. Why am I blanking on
Charlie
the name?
Sheen.
There you go.
Charlie Sheen's character from the movie Wall Street, which I still haven't seen because I am a terrible terrible method actor. So that was his idea, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool, but like I want to wear a pink button down like that one Simpsons episode where Homer's or Bart washed his hat with the whites. So I was like, all right, I'll wear like a pink button down. I was like, I gotta wear a clip-on tie and like have someone rip it off or something like that. So anyway, so yeah, just I went to Kmart when Kmart was still a thing in more than like 2 places on Earth, and I bought a pink button down and like really baggy black trousers, and I wore my wrestling shoes. And my first match was on, I think it was July 26, 2013, if I'm not mistaken, and it was a student battle royal. And yeah, it was like nerve-wracking, like just a weird day. And like actually that was also Bear Beefcake's first match too, and he was O'Doyle at the time. He was O'Doyle from Billy Madison. That was like his gimmick.
Yeah, we had talked about that on his episode. I interviewed him last week, and we talked about the whole O'Doyle thing, which yeah, I mean, I don't think that people understand what PWS was at the time. Like, if you're not like a New York, New Jersey guy, like if you're listening to this from like, who knows where, you don't realize PWS had like this cast of characters among their students that were all these super either unique gimmicks or just like flat out off the fucking wall. Like you had CPA and you had O'Doyle and you had, the
Starman.
Well, yes, a Starman. I forgot. I was going to say the pirate, the swashbuckler,
and Salty the deckhand at the time.
Habib from the car wash as well. Like these were guys who you saw on shows every month from this promotion, and the fucking crowd loved this shit. And all these dudes for the most part could actually fucking work. So it wasn't like, absolute fucking horseshit. These guys could all go. They just had insane gimmicks.
Yeah.
Yeah, PWS is something else. Sweet Christmas, that has to be the most ridiculous interview we've ever had on here, but it is 110% on brand for Nick Stapp. And again, next week you've got part 2, where, man, we just go into some even crazier things that have happened to him. Before we get out of here, you should go ahead and give a follow to us on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at year1pod. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcasting app and leave us a review. Huge shout out to the following people for picking up King of Chaos NYC shirts this week: Cody, Ariella, Sam and Tracy, Laura, and Megan. Thank you guys so much for feeding America, and thanks you as well. Shout out to Heroes for the music. You can check them out on Spotify. Shout out to Joanna Robinson for all the artwork and design. Dewey Chan on all social media. Shout out to the Funkenstein Wrestling Superstore for sponsoring the show, located at the Englishtown Flea Market and on eBay. Make sure to check them out and give their Facebook page a like for all your wrestling merch needs. That'll be it for this episode of the Year One Wrestling Podcast. I'm Logan Black telling you, be awesome to each other. Peace and love.